About a week or so to convince him. He's a very critical fellow, but I managed.
And I then had to turn the tables on him and try to convince him that if he had seen what he claimed he'd seen, he had made a major discovery, that this would be a matter of great importance to anyone studying the ancient Greek world and religion and Delphi in particular, and that we should go back there and try to document this.
With Hale, de Boer retraced the steps he first took in 1985.
Well, I came here in the 80s when I was working for the Greek government, who were interested in having nuclear plants on Greek territory. Now, obviously, in a country that has a lot of earthquakes and volcanoes, that is a very, very dangerous thing to have. And so they wanted to make very sure that where they planned to have eventual nuclear plants, there was no seismic activity. That's to say, there were no earthquakes.
It was while surveying the area that de Boer spotted a road crew widening the road.
They had excavated part of the road and they had exposed a beautiful fault plane. And I thought to myself, hey, this is sort of interesting because I see evidence for a fault to the west of Delphi and I see evidence for a fault to the east of Delphi. Logically, they should be one and the same fault. All I have to do is sort of trace one east and the other one west and hope that they can connect. And I did that.
De Boer hiked for miles, tracking the fault line. Satellite photos later confirmed his suspicions.
Once you have the help of the satellite maps, it's very, very clear that this fault continues all the way east, below the town of Delphi, from very below the oracle site, and then continues all the way to Percora.
The presence of the fault line corresponded with the earliest known accounts of the powers of the oracle, dating back 1,700 years before the birth of Christ.
It was a pasture on the side of Mount Parnassus, and a goat herd named Koretas came here with his flock of goats. And he noticed that when they got near a little fissure in the mountainside, they bleated in a strange way. So Koretas was curious, and he went and he hung his head over the place, and he started to speak in tongues.
It was believed to be the voice of Gaia, the Earth Mother, and it was her cult of women who took charge of this sacred place. Generation after generation, priestesses were trained from childhood to serve at this shrine built on the spot where a sacred spring bubbled to the surface. Over time, the old gods gave way to new. A young Apollo was said to have slain a mighty serpent or python at the site of Delphi.
And by doing so, he claimed this spot as his own, and he took over the oracle, and he gave oracles here on behalf of his father, Zeus, who was the source of all wisdom. But he couldn't get rid of those women because they had been part of the tradition of Delphi. They were entrenched in the rituals of the place. They were the only ones with the tradition of how to speak for the god, how to get into that oracular trance. So we have the very anomalous situation of a male god speaking through the mouth of a woman here at Delphi.
A great temple eventually replaced the humble shrine, and the priestess, still called the Pythia, after the python Apollo had slain, was no longer possessed by a gentle earth mother, but by an imperious god. As the fame of the oracle spread, seekers came from all over the ancient world. Tradition has it that Alexander the Great once climbed these slopes, demanding and receiving a divine assurance of continued victory. And it was here that the philosopher Socrates was declared to be the wisest of all men. New structures were erected all around the temple to accommodate the growing crowds.
The oracle only gave prophecies 9 times a year, but almost any time of the year that you came here, except midwinter, you would have found a very bustling sort of center. It began to sprout additional features to bring people here. And so a great theater was built here at Delphi, where dramatic productions were put on, looking out over the Pleistos Gorge. A gymnasium was put in, so people could come and exercise, wrestle, run, train, live that beautiful life. And way up the slope, a stadium was constructed to be part of the Pythian Games that were held here every few years. So the site became like a great park, like a great entertainment center, with at its heart that oracle.
The oracle marked the site where the shrine to Gaia once stood, above a fissure and a sacred spring. What was it about this geographical feature that changed the entire landscape of the ancient world? De Boer and Hale turned to the ancient writings of a scholar named Plutarch, a priest at Delphi.
Plutarch was, I would almost say, a naturalist or an early scientist. He was an extremely good observer of nature.
Plutarch tells us the gas itself could rise up to the surface either as a free gas or dissolved in the water, which shows he must have been able to see bubbles coming up through the water.
He never said, you know, it's a hydrocarbon gas or it's a sulfate gas or this or that. He just said gases. And he said that those gases were influencing the Pythia.
Theories about an intoxicating gas had been discounted after the excavation of the Aditon in 1913. But according to Dr. Stephen Sota, a researcher working near the Gulf of Corinth, just a few miles from Delphi, such gas releases are as common today as they were 2,000 years ago.
This whole region seems to be subject to gas emission through faults connected with earthquakes. We found a number of giant submarine pockmarks, or craters on the seafloor that showed evidence of gases coming out of the ground of the seafloor, having formed them. In geological thinking, gases are associated with volcanic areas or areas of hot springs, and we don't have that here. But we do have this spreading rift where the crust of the earth is pulling apart, and this produces fissures that extend deep into the earth, and this is an area which allows fluids from those depths to work their way up toward the surface.
It was this common phenomenon the French archaeologists might have missed.
They found just one layer of clay after the other and one layer of rock debris after the other, and they became quite disappointed, and they dug deeper and deeper into it, and then they said, there is no big cave. But the Greek word for cave can be translated in different ways. It can also be a fracture or a vein or something like that.
To confirm his suspicions, De Boer re-examined the original photographs taken by the excavation team.
And so I went over those photos, and I saw that in those layers, actually offsetting some of those layers, were cracks that were probably not more than ½ inch to 1 inch wide. And they sort of ignored those as insignificant cracks, they call them, that were running through there. And that's, of course, the most perfect fracture that you can have for water to rise up and for gases to rise up.
But what kind of gas could have caused the trances, the frenzy, and the prophecy so long associated with the oracle? If a chemical culprit could be found, science would come one step closer to solving this ancient riddle. Of the thousands of petitioners that consulted the oracle at Delphi, few were given an unequivocal response. Most prophecies came in the form of cryptic verse. The wording was often obscure, and misinterpreting the oracle could be deadly. The case of Croesus, king of Lydia, in what is now Turkey, was typical. In 550 BC, preparing to invade Persia, Croesus consulted the oracle. He was told, "If you attack, you will destroy a great kingdom." Croesus attacked, only to trigger a massive retaliation. The prophecy was fulfilled. Croesus had indeed destroyed a great kingdom.